Not enough time spent scrimming on these custom maps. Let's find out. We hop into game number 2, as it's going to be Frisian Marshes making its return. Let's see if DeMusliM can do it with what I believe is still the highest win rate, Civ, here on this custom map in competitive.
Indeed, DeMusliM, with the HRE out there, very powerful civilization, partly because of the access of the sheep, and this is something that has been debated last week and also this week as well. Ton of sheep available here for both players, and that makes it able, or it makes the HRE able to condense their base very well, leverage the power of the Aachen Chapel. So that is one of the reasons why DeMusliM loves to use the HRE here, and generally any players love to use the HRE. But you see what Mist is doing. He's moving to the north, picking up the sheep from right next to DeMuslim's base. He just wants to yoink as much as he can, because it's not about what you get for yourself, it's about what you deny from the HRE, and so far, it looks pretty good. DeMusliM barely has like 4 sheep to work with.
And if there's something I say to people that pick the HRE is don't be greedy, which is what he's been in this game. So many players go out to the mid-map first because they assume the sheep back at home are going to be safe. And that is what makes it such a fantastic move from Mr. Something I think other people already taking notes of is like, actually, why am I not doing that? There's such a dense amount of sheep right next to the players' bases. It makes sense that I should try and make a gamble for it. Now, you aren't always going to hit this. Some players are going to realize and adjust. But realistically, if they do make that adjustment, you can be halfway across the field when they're still sitting around the back of their base, so you can still win the chase out into the midfield off the back of this.
Indeed, let's actually take a look at how much sheep he was able to gather. It looks like he's at the lower 10s. In fact, it's less than that. He's just got 8 to work with. And that's bad because when you're playing the HRE over here, your entire game plan might rely on the fact that you're not leaving your base at the beginning of the game. Missing out on that many sheep could force you to just replan your entire game plan, because suddenly you are going to be much more strained on food as compared to where you would be if you were more successful gathering sheep.
Well, we could be in for a very big surprise here because DeMusliM has a very different approach to HRE. Some people like to go for the multi-TC approach, and he's one of those players, but he does it in an aggressive fashion. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a TC on this map drop towards those ponds that will allow him to keep his fishing going. And the remarkable thing about going for early TCs as the HRE is if you think about how tanky these early TCs are in feudal at least, it's very hard to kill them before like 15 minutes. Against the HRE, it's even more difficult because of the emergency repairs.
Indeed, that is a great point that you bring up. Emergency repairs, it has been debated very heavily, and it is one of the most powerful feudal age bonuses of any civilization. It's very underrated, but it makes it much more difficult to push an HRE player in feudal. And when you look at the French, they want to stay in feudal. They want to push you in feudal simply because that's where they feel the most confident in. With the French, you want to extend your feudal age, play multiple town centers, potentially push, rather than just go fast castle.
And there it is, DeMusliM going out in the stone now. And this TC drop, like there's a few different locations he could choose to go. He could go for the double pond to the south. Some players actually like to opt towards the board. They're a little bit too far in this situation. I think it is going to just primarily be here because the deer on top of it as well. Like you can see the lush valley course showing you there. The reason I bring up the idea of a more aggressive TC is DeMuslim's the type of person that will play against, say, the Deli on Hill and Dale, and he'll go and drop a TC in the literal middle of the map. He's not afraid to do this because of that value that E-Repairs gives you, making it almost impossible for any force to breach it before like 12, 13 minutes. And the cool thing about this play from Ben is the HRE is probably like top 3 for civs that can actually afford a second TC quickly. Not only can they get the resources initially to build it very fast via the prelates, but then because of their great gathering rates on food at home, they usually have surplus to afford both TCs pushing villages.
Yeah, that's a great point indeed, especially when you drop that second town center to a slightly more aggressive position where you do have access to shorefish. And as you see, he's indeed on stone. We have also seen, just in general, an emergence in the 2 TC builds of HRE. Even at the end or the second half of Golden League, people started experimenting with the second TC builds of HRE on maps like Lipany. And now you see why it could pay off really well, because in a scenario where you have limited amount of food in your base, you can easily move out for those spawns. Notably, this is an interesting Frisian Marshes generation. First of all, we do have 5 relics, which is something that we always gotta appreciate. Sometimes the map spawns a little wacky, but the interesting thing is that we have a limited amount of pawns on the right side. Usually it spawns with a lot more pawns, and now you see both players have essentially 3 little pawns close to their base, and then just a massive gap before the next pawns come up. So it's pretty well streamlined that you need your TC close to that first 3 pawns.
Look at that Lidakor. There's even some ponds big enough you could have a little naval battle on them. I think that's the biggest ponds we've seen on Frisian in the past, actually, if you look
Okay,
near the
what's
sacred
what's
site.
your over and under on the probability of us seeing Karak versus Karak here?
It's little baby battleships. Hell yeah, let's go. Okay.
Karak versus
so
Gallius. That's a better. Give me your over and under.
Yeah. Oof. I don't think we're gonna get this game. Maybe if we get those central ponds close together, like I just adding take notes to this, I'm gonna need like 2 ponds that are purposely big enough for ships that could be next to sacred. Damn, I kind of like that idea, but that means we bring back naval, and that's probably a bad idea. But okay, leading into a serious point, and I swear it's not just my trolley mind. There's some validity behind this idea. I've been actually theory crafting a way to like starve your opponent out in the mid game. How viable do you think it's going to be in the coming weeks for people to start dock dropping on their opponent's ponds? Because
Not
it deletes
really.
the shoreline fish. Because it deletes the shoreline fish. That's why.
Yeah, true. It feels more like an actual abuse type of strategy where you just go in, drop your dock, and then you cancel it. You get a full refund, and he lost all the shorefish.
Yep. That's what I mean. Like, because you could, folks, if you didn't know, like when you drop a dock, it deletes a lot of shoreline fish nearby. If you drop on these ponds, like 4 of the 5 fish there are just gone. And I've just broken the illusion. Oh god! I actually like. Hopefully the pros aren't watching this right now. Like they might be They might go try that later, and I might have ruined our favorite new map.
Yeah, alright, there's the second town center coming up here from DeMusliM. So far, relatively passive game out there. You just have 2 knights roaming the map here for Mista, just for good measure, you know. You're French, so you are mandatorily making knights here for map control. Now, those guys are just chilling on the wood line of DeMusliM. DeMusliM doesn't seem to care. He's just moving out with his TC towards the hunt. And oh, look at that. That's a juicy spot. Look at that spot.
Yeah, cool. Highlighted for us a lot earlier, but there's a lot of villagers invested at a time when the knight's already out in the field. Build your scrubs, build! Faster! 4 people here. Oh god, he's just gonna run?
Oh
no! The timing on this!
Oh, this is why, like, the French could have such an upside on this map. Just a single knight denying that expansion TC is so massive. And keep in mind, DeMusliM has a limited amount of food inside his base, and he is being denied of 1 hunt and 2 droplets of shorefish. In fact, look at underneath that town center. He's almost out of sheep. Now he's probably gonna try to fast castle this, but the concern I'm having for him is that he's going to arrive to Castle Age with no food left under that town center, and he won't be able to afford any units in Castle.
Now, he could start to transition early onto wood, but right now, DeMusliM has no woodworkers. He could get the wood very fast as well, because he is under the Arc and Trample influence, so he's getting 40% increased gathering rate. But instead, DeMusliM setting up the blacksmith early. I'm trying to figure out why you want a blacksmith right now. Like, even if you're prepping for the Burgrave Palace, your food, sir, you're going to run out of food.
Unless... Like, I can see the concept here. I think what he's going to try and do is go Burgrave, drop a couple of spears, and then move out with the expansion town center. So, like, just when he's running out of food, he's going to move out and get himself the shorefish. Will it work? I'm not sure, because every single second he's delayed into Castle Age, every single second he's delayed, he has to spend more time in feudal, which also means he's making villagers, which also means he's depleting his food bank. Of course, he could stop making villagers, but then he falls behind so heavily in eco. And this is why... when it comes to a fast castle, it has to be a fast castle, not a slow castle.
Yeah. Well, I'm on my doubts about how good this castle is going to be. Like, honestly, in the situation with the Burgrave, like, as you said, the food's running out fast. The concept behind getting the spears seems good, but, like, realistically, he could have maybe built a racks anyway and already been pushing spears. He probably would have still got his timing, but instead, like, DeMusliM, if his plan is to get the spearmen out and get the TC down afterwards, he is definitely going to need to get back on that wood, because if you look at those numbers, Lidakor, right now, he can't afford the town center, and he definitely won't be able to if he starts pushing spears en masse.
Indeed, that's going to be a source of concern. By the way, Mr. Stone mining stone over here. He's mining stone like a madman. Makes me wonder if he's thinking about the 3rd town center. I think we have seen a set yesterday where it was like 4 or 5 town center for a French player. It was a little excessive, let's just say that.
It was it the Matisse? It was the Matisse series where he spread out to the other corner of town centers, like he was wriggling around. The interesting thing about doing it in this game is, like, there's actually a lot of value. If you check the free ponds near the sacred site for Mista, there's even a berry patch there as well. So if he drops a TC between those 3 ponds, he gets insane value on the food department.
Yeah, there's definitely a good upside on dropping those extra town centers, and it also gives you a ton of safety, right? It makes it much more difficult for your opponent to raid you. Obviously, those town centers are not as difficult to destroy as the starting TC, but it still doesn't mean that, you know, 1 or 2 knights can do a ton of damage to you. So, the value in the third town center here could be massive for Mista, but instead he's going Castle instead. Makes me wonder if he's going Royal Institute, seeing the Burgrave, or he prefers the Guildhall, because I think if you see Burgrave, you probably prefer the Royal Institute. And there it is.
Yeah, Royal Institute to make sure he's not going to fall behind. By the way, just to go back on what Core was highlighting on the screen there, that's 12,000 food you saw a moment ago where the fish and the berries are. So if Mr. does plop a TC down there, he's set probably for the entire game. Because I don't see this game going past the 12,000 food mark at this rate, considering DeMusliM needs a very aggressive timing now off of his setbacks towards this castle.
And it's concerning for DeMusliM that his military buildup is so slow, because obviously he's trained on food, and when you go for Burgrave, you want to be spamming out infantry, so just having 3 spearmen, actually, now it's up to 8 spearmen, but still, the numbers are just lackluster, and it's also a very slow-moving army on a very open map. Once Mr. reaches Castle Age, you face the danger of just your eco being overrun by all those knights. You'll have some relics over here for DeMusliM, but obviously the impact is going to be much smaller as compared to you having the Regnitz Cathedral, so it's gonna be some passive gold, but he's already down 22 villagers. This is looking concerning for Mista, or for DeMusliM rather, and honestly concerning at best.
Yeah, maybe it's a case of like, you know, hindsight is 2020, and I can say this now because we can see he got blocked out, but like realistically, I wonder if he would have got more value out of just going Regnitz and having built 2 or 3 racks while you were being blocked from moving out to your town center, right? Once that happens, you move back and just build them straight away, get back on the wood. Because I think in that situation, he could have got a relatively comparative castle timing, got into the Regnitz, and he still would have had enough spearmen to guard in the field, because Mista's now only making the transition to archers. It's very delayed. The Muslim will at least now get the TC down, but look at the difference in villages. Even with Holy Inspiration on, say, half of your eco right now, the numbers don't add up in your favor.
It's going to come down to the timing. I agree with you on this one. You are going to, at one point, have a comparable eco to Mista. The problem is that by the time you reach that point, Mista is going to be 1 step ahead. Mista is going to start building up his army, and it's going to be the army timing that will snowball things potentially. You see 2 relics over here, little lost. I assume we're going to see 2 towers. Wait a minute. These guys are inspiring with the relic in their hands. That's some next level multitasking. How heavy is a relic?
Guys, I don't understand. I understand when the scholars do it because they're like chads in their 20s. These guys look like they're 40 or 50, right? And they don't look like they're Popeye, so I don't know how they're holding it. By the way, can we get additional buffs to the HRE? They definitely need it. Let's say when they're holding a relic, they buff with Holy Inspiration at 60% gathering rate by default. There you go.
How heavy is a relic like that, though? Just imagine
we don't know, though, right? What if it's just made of, like, paper mache?
Aren't you afraid that you drop it? Imagine that valuable relic. You worked so hard for it, and you just wave it in your hands to inspire villagers nearby, and you'd accidentally drop it, and it's like, it wasn't me! It wasn't me who broke it!
Yeah, but whenever you do that, Lidakor, you got to learn the lessons of how to deal with ancient religious relics. Like, if you drop it and it's got a giant dent, and people are like, hold on a sec, what happened out there? It's like, oh, did you not know about this dent? This was in the Battle of Thermopylae from Great Spartacus himself. Now, history boffins already hate me for both those references. Where they defended against a shot from the God King Emperor by blocking with this very relic. Yes, it actually happened several hundred years ago. I didn't drop it when I was going on the coffee run.
You're saying that, but there is some historical stuff like that. Just, you know, a Hungarian reference, me myself being Hungarian. The Hungarian crown actually has a cross on the top, which is like tilted 30 degrees to one side. No one knows why, but the theory is that, like, at one point, it was randomly stolen. Like, there was a queen who was like, wait a minute, I don't want you to be the king, so I will just steal the crown. They smuggled it out of the country, and they think that it was damaged during that smuggling process. And ever since then, for 100 years or so, actually more than 100 years, like a couple 100 years now, the cross on the top of the crown is actually tilted to one side. It's actually not unprecedented that you damage some pretty valuable artifacts when you are, you know, doing your shenanigans in the medieval times.
Feels like that's the type of thing that if someone looks too close and like, why is that damaged? You go, what? How did you notice it was damaged? Why are you so obsessed with this? Are you trying to steal it? So you just turn it around, right? Spinning stories, Lidakor. And the story we're spinning right now is that Mr. has a lot of control on this map. DeMusliM at least got his extension, but he's completely static right now. He's dealing with man-at-arms and spears. So the only way that DeMusliM gets to play further out than this, unless he takes like one TC at a time, is if he now starts to wall up. It's actually not a bad idea, because then it condenses Mr. into a direct fight. Direct fight where he's kind of discounted. Look at Mr.'s composition. He's not hard pushing knights anymore. It's mostly archers, and DeMusliM is hard stacking into the man-at-arms now.
Yeah, as you said, he needs to start walling up and he needs to be the one initiating those fights, which is something that he can only do if Mista cannot raid him. Because right now the problem that he's facing is that, as you said, his army is very static. Wololo? Nope. We always get teased, but it never comes through. But yeah, like, Mista's army
we
is...
got a big one yesterday. The death cry, Wololo.
Big in quotation marks. But yeah, like, as you see, DeMusliM is always forced to just react and chase. He needs to be the one forcing the engagements because he has the composition to beat Mista's army right now. It's just the fact that he can't force engagements because Mista is running circles around him. And now you see there is royal bloodlines on those knights. And the concern for DeMusliM is that Arbaletri are making an appearance now with crossbow stirrups. So time is ticking, or clock is ticking over here for DeMusliM to do something before Mista has the units to react to the unit composition of DeMusliM here.
And what he's doing is switching it up again. It's time for the lines next to come into the field. And with the stealth forest, you can actually catch your opponent off guard if they're not looking. Man-at-arms are engaged for the moment. The Arbitriers get into the mixer here. Only a few Arbors on the front line yet, and the backstab comes out from the spears.
Look at that!
Wrapping
That's
around,
beautiful!
Forcing him back. And now you need to retreat. This is going to be a bad fight if Mr. hangs around. He's going to have to splinter off in directions and get away from this because the Langstack are starting to add in some serious damage now joining the fray.
Yeah, the knights got heavily damaged over here. You didn't have the meat shield, and now your archers are being overrun by the men-at-arms. You simply can't focus down the spearmen. DeMusliM is doing a great job when it comes to just running circles around, making sure that the archers can't focus the spears. And you see, despite having dozens of archers on the battlefield, the spearmen are still alive and taking good engagements over here. As good as it gets over here for DeMusliM, he buys himself a ton of precious time, trades off the infantry to really good value here.
Yeah, and the spin will last to flop down, and while this is happening, DeMusliM is rebuilding a new line behind this. The Langsneck man-at-arms has at least set back the timing, but admittedly not getting as much value as he needed to. Look at the count for Mista. The knight count is now starting to crawl up, and this is where you might not have the ample defense force to hold here. DeMusliM, he never went for heavy static defenses. There's no keep drop here. There's no walls on the flanks, so if he starts to lose a fight like that again, Mista doesn't even need to keep all the knights in this formation. He can split them up and do what French players do best, pull you apart.
And let's not forget that DeMusliM once again could have issues when it comes to accessibility of food, because sure enough, his expansion town center secured some shorefish for him, but those inspired villagers deplete resources really fast. You see those spawns? They're getting closer and closer to running out of fish. And the next spawns that are coming up for DeMusliM, those are right now controlled by Mista, whereas for Mista, he's got all the map control in the world. Sure enough, as Core is showing us, you can go for farms or berries, but compared to the shore fishing of the French, that is going to be a very underwhelming source of food for you in the long run.
Nah, and this is one of the conundrums, like with the HREs, because you have those better gathering rates, you feel like the war machine never stops, but it does when you're finding out resources. The only time it's fine is when you switch into farms, and as we know, most players try to dodge that farm transition. It's very pricey. The entrance fee, 75 wood per farm, is quite a heavy demand, especially when you're trying to fund a war here.
At least DeMusliM gets the return value a little sooner because he's got the Aachen Chapel boosting those farms. But as you pointed out, when your opponent is just fully focused on pumping out army from every single bit of resources he's gathering, and that's a lot of resources we're talking about with the shorefish accessible, then you simply can't afford to spend a ton of resources on farm transition. So you also have to just keep investing into army. But that means that you could be running out of food a lot sooner over here because you have way less spawns to work with right now. And finally, those knights are coming in for raids once again. DeMista kind of stopped the raids recently, but now he's back to 20 knights, so you can easily detach a couple of them to just go in for these individual raiding missions. And those boys are tanky, ladies and gents. That's 310 HP on a castle age unit.
That's what a horse looks like that ate another horse, folks. Like, it's ridiculously difficult to kill them, and the commitment of troops to do it for each one. Not only are you slow on the chase, but you're going to be slow to whittle them down, even if you have a lot of spears. And he is reluctant to push the spears right now. You have to consider that Mista's still got a nice mix of Arbitriers and Archers. So he has the counter damage out, and it means that DeMusliM has to lean heavy on Langsneck to solve his problems. Issue with that is gold. Look where he's being raided right now. There's a raid in from Mista into the base, onto the gold line, and shutting him down. And remember that DeMusliM, he went for the Burgrave, so he can't afford this passively off of the relics he's obtained.
And also, just how fragile that unit is, that's a concern as well for Landsknechte. I mean, as you pointed out, gold is an issue. It's a very pricey unit, but it's also very fragile. So the Knights, they will take decent engagements against the Landsknecht heavy composition, simply because those units are so fragile. Now I have emergency repairs popping out here for DeMusliM, but that's just going to buy him a couple of seconds. I think he's gonna be forced to take this engagement over here, because he won't be able to keep that town center alive for long. And indeed, here comes the flood of infantry. It is the Zerg of Age of Empires 4. Welcome to HRE with Burgrave Palace. Relic actually getting yoinked over there. Beautiful move by DeMusliM. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, he's gonna return that to his base. He's gonna need every little bit he can get though. Like, there's no denying that if you look at it right now, the eco lead the Mista's built up. My concern at this rate is even if you hold on to your little trinkets as long as you can as the earlier Roman Empire, it's going to be kind of historically accurate. As the HRE starts to crumble, the French get stronger and stronger. And the worry about this is that at this rate, Mista's going to be able to go Imperial. You can't if you're DeMusliM. Look at the pop cap right now. He's already now at 200, so everything he gets now is just going to be stockpiled. I expect Imperial in the next 2 minutes max by Mista. DeMusliM is at least 4 minutes out.
That's exactly it, and we could potentially see the Red Palace making an appearance over here, because sure enough, College of Artillery has a better long-term upside, but for a game that you're playing over here, if you're Mista with all these towers trying to just suffocate DeMusliM, make him run out of resources inside his base, a Red Palace would give you a ton of map control. Like, a Red Palace on those spawns would basically make it impossible for DeMusliM with a Castle Age army to get to those spawns, and he would be forced to make a farm transition, which you can leverage as a window for a potential finishing blow.
Oh god, the Knights are in again. The gold is going to shut down, and he can't be without it, folks. Like, right now, everything he wants to do requires, you can see DeMusliM, there's a crossbow in there. He was trying to switch over, but he can't afford it, so he had to go for the arch in the end. He still needs Langstick, he still needs man-at-arms. Even if you do get that gold reserve, remember that that's a baby stack. That's a baby gold vein. It isn't going to last you that long at this stage of the game.
And behind this one, trebuchet number is also increasing for DeMista, so he's going to start shelling those buildings. How long can you wait with this? I guess we have our answer over here, because DeMusliM is just going to unleash the Zerg on Mista's eco. Could we see a landmark snipe? Like, legit, this is enough for a landmark snipe, potentially, if Mista doesn't react fast enough.
Well, the problem is Mista can build another landmark. Like, by the time you're through 2 landmarks, I think he just builds a Red Palace or College of Artillery somewhere else. We'll have to see, because remember, he's got those extensions to the south side with the TCs, so he has a very quick way of booming up, and I think that's the hesitation from DeMusliM. He doesn't see high value in the base, and also if he dives in here, there's no saying that Imperial isn't already being built up by Mista. And Mista, now that he gets the confirmation, begins to dive in. Trebs hitting the Burgrave. Nice now riding in. Gonna get rid of that passive gold trickle by denying the Relic here, and then they'll dive through. And the farm's gonna be exposed because DeMusliM moved entirely out of position here.
And you're losing the Burgrave. It's a great production building, but it also means that that is essentially the only production building that you use, because you simply don't need anything else for infantry production. You lose that, you lose your entire production, and it looks like now DeMusliM is diving in here.
He needs to be quick as well, because if he runs past that keep again, next time he's got boiling oil. So he needs to take a good fight now, but Mista, so many outposts. Did he misclick the French when he wanted the Mongols here? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, looks like trebuchets are getting picked off by the infantry here, but it's the number of losses that we're looking at. DeMusliM losing a substantial amount of the infantry, and keep in mind, there is the Red Palace coming up here right on the front. It is not something that DeMusliM can stop, and it's gonna be in a very aggressive position. I don't know how long this infantry can hold, especially because some of that is now archers. Archers that will do nothing against 25 knights with royal bloodlines.
That's not true. They'll bloody the hooves of the horses, and that's about it. Yeah, more or less that's all that's going to happen there. DeMusliM now in the worst situation, the nightmare of every HRE player. When you're looking across and seeing your opponent's Imperial, oh, you're still stuck in castle. And this is not going to be the type of rush that can end the game. Instead, it could end your game. Knights move in onto the wood lines. Limited spearmen in reserve to hold back here, and the villager chase across the map is going to be ineffective because Mista is too quick to peel them away. It just feels like DeMusliM is slowly going to start losing ground here. He's just being dodged on multiple fronts. And as that happens, not only is Mista dodging these fights, he's reaching deeper and deeper into your base.
It's a slow crawl forward right now from Mista, and you see DeMusliM is trying his best to counterattack, but it's difficult because now you have the castles, now you have the Red Palace, the towers out there, and every time you decide to launch a counterattack, there is a very strong defensive position that the Mista can fall back to, and you see now, with the Arbaletry placement of that Red Palace, that is just going to melt all the infantry. The moment the Muslim sees that, he has to disengage. He can't push deep in there, and we are seeing the response from Mista coming into that infantry flood. Hand Cannoneers soon making an appearance on the battlefield.
Yeah, and the Muslims army about to make a disappearing act occur here. Like, they are not able to keep reproducing. The numbers look okay for the moment for the Muslim, but like in the next 2 minutes, either gold or food is going to dry out. I don't think you can keep this going for long. Like, you can see how that gold is being chipped away fast, and now the Knights, they're starting to stake a claim. It's very hard to push them away consistently here. And if this keep goes up, he's going to have an easy dive-in point. You need to try to deny this,
stop
but
it.
how do you? Yeah, you can't, because you don't have great range units to do so, and that's exactly why he will just call GG. Game 2 goes to Mista, 1-1 apiece.
Beautiful finishing blowout there for Mista, and he has played a really good resource control game over here. He was conscious about the fact that DeMusliM doesn't have a lot of sheep, and this is what we were discussing. The fact that Mista collected so much sheep for himself wasn't important because he wanted to use the sheep. It was all about making sure that DeMusliM cannot use that. Made it much more difficult for DeMusliM to just sit inside his base, go for that fast castle Burgrave play, and then expand. And ultimately, he just suffocated him out of resources, used the mobility of the Knights really well, and if Core shows us the overall resources gathered, I think we'll have a clearer picture when it comes to why the Mista was able to finish this game as he did. And indeed, there is, look at that, it's not even the food actually, it's the wood to a certain extent with the raids, but it's probably about the gold. Like, that gold differential in an HRE versus French matchup is decisive.
Yeah, and I think the big thing I come back to is the question mark on the Burgrave choice. Like, was this the situation where you needed to change it? I think this game, if you think about the choice to go Burgrave and the way that DeMusliM was opening up trying to originally secure the fish, it feels like the build order, right? It feels like a clear game plan, 15, 20 minutes already locked in on what you want to do. The problem with trying to have this fixed plan is like it can be very good to optimize your game, but you have to realize that most plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. And Mista made sure it was that way when the first enemy, the first knight comes out, he denies you, he delays your timings, and he blocks you out. And I think looking back at this game, that's the moment where you had to reflect, like, maybe it's Regnitz, it feels risky, it is greedy, but I need that extra greed to get back in this game, or I'm just inherently playing from behind.